They say loyalty is a virtue until it turns into a leash. I knew mine had choked me the moment I got a company-wide Happy Retirement Marie email, while I was still sitting in my office at Vanguard Freight Solutions in Toledo, Ohio. No conversation, no handshake, just a half-rotted fruit basket and a recycled card signed by people who still thought I worked in inventory control. But let's rewind. 12 years, that's how long I bled for Vanguard. I started in a windowless, converted supply room with a title so vague it sounded made up and a chair that screamed every time I sat down. Logistics Coordinator, which meant I did everything from tracking delayed shipments to coaching warehouse temps on why stacking crates like Jenga was not a viable long-term strategy. I didn't have a fancy degree, didn't have a mentor. What I had was grit caffeine and the ability to keep things moving when everything around me stalled. You want numbers? Fine. In 2014, Vanguard was 7 days from insolvency. I remember the emergency meeting like it's burned into my memory, cheap suits pit stains, and someone sobbing quietly into a balance sheet. Our raw material supplier from Arizona Iron Bridge Metals was about to pull the plug unless we guaranteed $10 million in future purchases. No bank would touch us. Not even the one that gave us calendars with kittens on them. So I stood up, cleared my throat, and said, "What if I did?" The room froze. I'd like to say I sounded confident. I probably sounded sleep-deprived and a little unhinged. But I knew the numbers. I'd just finished paying off my mortgage. So we drafted a clause. Clause 9B, naming me as the personal guarantor for Iron Bridge shipments. If I ever left the company, the guarantee could be revoked immediately without appeal. They signed the next morning. The shipments came, the quotas were hit, and I went home, laid on my couch, and stared at the ceiling for 3 hours, wondering if I just bankrupted my future for a company that barely kept the lights on. So yeah, 12 years. I ran that department like a drill sergeant. VP of Logistics wasn't just a title, it was who I was. I memorized dock numbers, rerouted supply lines mid-storm, and even hired a guy who once tried to steal from us because he was the only one honest enough to admit it. We went from patchwork operations to streamlined systems, from crisis to consistency, and suddenly I was legacy, which is just corporate code for old and in the way. Oh, and before I keep going, if you've made it this far without hitting that little subscribe button, now's a good time to fix that. Yeah, 97% of y'all are ghosting us like we're your ex's voicemail. So go ahead, click that subscribe button. Keeps the lights on and the coffee hot enough to survive a warehouse at 6 a.m. Anyway, I should have seen it coming. The tone started to shift. Meetings where I wasn't needed. Strategy sessions I used to lead got rebranded as Fresh Perspective Forums. Emails where I was CC'd instead of addressed. They even replaced our holiday cards with QR codes for digital gratitude. One time, someone in marketing asked me to shorten my email signature for efficiency. That's when it hit me. I wasn't an executive anymore. I was a liability with a legacy title. Still, I stuck around because I believed in the work, in my crew, in the ridiculous, half-naive hope that loyalty still counted for something in corporate America. But here's the trap. When you believe in something harder than the people running it, that belief becomes a threat. And in my case, a very expensive one. First time I saw him, he was leaning against the break room fridge like it owed him rent. Shiny navy suit, gelled hair you could use as industrial adhesive. Loafers so clean I'm not convinced they ever met concrete. Said his name was Brendan, which already sounded like a venture capital red flag. He introduced himself with a blinding grin and a handshake that lasted 2 seconds too long. "I'm shadowing you this quarter," he announced, like it was a gift I didn't know I wanted. I blinked. "Shadowing who, you?" he said, still grinning. Uncle thought it'd be good for me to understand the full scope of logistics before I, scale operations. That uncle, our brand new CEO, married into the board like a spreadsheet with a prenup. I should have known nepotism was on the menu the moment they started tossing around phrases like energy pivot and vision refresh. Brendan was the full package an MBA from somewhere with limestone buildings, zero real experience, and the kind of overconfidence usually reserved for poker night and bad karaoke. "Great," I said, Because that's what you say when you're 3 years from retirement and 5 minutes from throwing your favorite number one VP mug against the copier. He followed me around like a poorly coded chatbot. Asked questions that weren't questions, just smug little pop quizzes. Why still use rail for Arizona routes? Wouldn't just-in-time slash our storage costs. Have you explored predictive AI platforms? You know the kind of nonsense you ask when you've never explained to a trucker why Dock 4 doesn't open on Sundays. I started calling him Intern Skynet in my head. Then came the kicker, an invite from HR titled Mentorship and Transition Strategy. Apparently, I was supposed to hand over everything. 12 years of systems, vendor contacts, and freight fail-safes handed to a guy who once asked me what a bill of lading was. I played nice. Walked Brendan through the warehouse dashboard like he was my nephew using Excel for the first time. Let him click around the routing software until he accidentally double-booked a flatbed out of Cedar Rapids and caused a 4-day delay we had to call weather-related. All the while, I smiled like a kindergarten teacher on a mild sedative. But at night, I started digging through old folders. Physical ones. Because unlike Brendan, I trust ink over cloud storage. And there it was, wedged behind payroll audits and 3-ring binders from a decade ago, the Iron Bridge Metals Agreement, the contract that saved this company back when we were running the logistics department on duct tape and desperation. I flipped to Clause 9B, and my stomach gave a slow, silent flip. My name, Marie T. Kessler, still there. Printed in ink, no addendum, no revisions, no replacement signatory, just me in black and white listed as the sole personal guarantor for all alloy shipments. They never removed me, never even thought to. I didn't scream, didn't storm into anyone's office, just laid the contract flat on my kitchen table like a sleeping bomb and stared at it, wondering how no one had noticed that the only thing keeping our raw material pipeline alive was a clause from 2014 and me. The next morning, Brendan asked if we had a drone strategy. I smiled, handed him a sitemap, and gently marked the exact spot I'd metaphorically bury his career if I had to. I didn't act yet, but I made a clean copy of that contract. And I bought a fireproof safe. The following week, Brendan strutted into the quarterly ops meeting like he'd survived a blizzard with just his charisma and a clipboard. Projector humming sleeves rolled up like he'd lifted something heavier than a Starbucks order. Title slide, Streamlining Logistics, A New Era. I already wanted to chew the dry erase markers in protest. Then came slide 2, Regional Routing Adjustments, Depot Consolidations, and a fuel optimization model I'd built back in February. My format. My data, my math. He hadn't even fixed the typo in the Decatur corridor freight optimization threshold. 2 T's. I remember the night I sent that draft up the chain. It disappeared somewhere between a Q1 Synergy update and oblivion. Now, here it was, on full display, presented as if Brendan had conjured it out of pure innovation. The room clapped. I sipped stale conference room coffee and smiled. Let him cook. I was holding the fire extinguisher. Until now, there he was. Brendan grinning like he'd cracked cold fusion, explaining his model with that chin-forward swagger. Only people who've never unloaded 6 pallets in the snow at 4 a.m. could pull off. While a printer jams. While a trucker yells. While dispatch thinks you're on vacation. Leadership was eating it up. Steve from finance nodded so aggressively, I thought he might launch himself across the table. Claire, the same Claire who once asked me if semis needed a steering wheel in the back, whispered, "This is the kind of thinking we've been missing." Not one person looked at me, not even a glance. I didn't speak, didn't move, just poured a lukewarm cup of conference room coffee and sipped it like it was arsenic. My smile, razor thin. The kind you perfect after years of watching mediocre people repackage your brilliance and get congratulated for the wrapping paper. When it ended, Brendan, ever the golden child, smiled and said, "Of course I want to thank the team for helping shape these ideas," which in corporate speak meant I'll take all the credit. But legally, I have to say this. The meeting broke. I walked back to my office, shut the door, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark for 3 minutes. Ping, calendar invite. Subject: retirement celebration planning. From HR. Location: 3rd floor cafeteria. Message, Marie. We're so thrilled to honor your incredible contributions as we transition into exciting new leadership. Please RSVP at your earliest convenience. I stared at it. Didn't blink. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. The next chapter's coming, and trust me, the fallout has only just begun. 50 minutes later, there was a knock. An intern barely old enough to rent a car stood holding a plastic-wrapped wicker basket. HR sent this, she mumbled. Inside 3 green apples, a bruised banana, some crackers shaped like leaves, and one pear that was already decomposing in the bottom, like a forgotten ambition. Like the party, it came a day too early and a dozen thoughts too late. I set it in the corner. Didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled open my bottom drawer and took out a battered cardboard banker's box. No fanfare, no teary-eyed farewell. Just unplugged my keyboard, yanked out my planner, grabbed my old chipped mug that read, "Ship Happens," and one framed photo of my team from 2014, the only year we hit quota every month without a single late truck. I didn't wipe my drive. Didn't delete a file. Let them choke on a decade of unarchived brilliance. At exactly 5:00 p.m., I walked out. No goodbye, no regrets. Just the sound of my heels on linoleum and the motion lights dying behind me. At home, I opened the closet, reached for the fireproof safe. Combo. My daughter's birthday. Inside was the manila folder. Still sealed, still sharp, still mine. The Ironbridge contract was still crisp, tucked inside its folder, like it hadn't been waiting silently to ruin someone's month. Clause 9B stared up at me like a loaded trap patient, sharp forgotten. I laid it flat on my kitchen table, the laminate scratched from years of coffee mugs and Sunday crosswords. Then I grabbed a pen and started drafting a letter. Not out of rage, not even out of sadness. Just calm, the kind of calm that only arrives after the last insult has been processed, labeled, and filed under irreversible. The sound of my ancient inkjet printer coming to life at 11:42 p.m. was the most satisfying thing I'd heard in years. Not the warehouse hum, not the polite applause at my forced retirement, not even the soft crack of my knees when I sit too long. No, this sound. It was justice spooling out in courier font. I'd been up for 4 hours, hoodie on hair, a mess, bent over the table like I was solving a cold case. Every word of that Ironbridge agreement mattered. And there it was, page 17, Paragraph 4, subsection C. The undersigned hereby agrees to serve as sole personal guarantor of material shipment continuity for the duration of active employment with Vanguard Freight Solutions, Inc. Upon cessation of employment, the undersigned may at will withdraw. Said guarantee by written notice to Ironbridge Metals, at which point all contractual obligations shall be deemed null. It read like a time capsule. Drafted by a younger, sharper, and significantly more cynical version of me, one who had just paid off her mortgage and had nothing to lose. I remembered the meeting clearly. The legal team was so desperate they barely read it. And now, it was a ghost clause, an unexploded shell buried under a decade of complacency. Still, I didn't trust my tired eyes. I called Lauren. She picked up on the second ring. Same no-nonsense voice she had back in our Brattle and Finch consulting days. "Tell me you're not calling about Brendan," she said. "Worse," I replied. "I think I found the detonator." I faxed the clause. Yes, faxed. Lauren insists on hard lines because, and I quote, "emails are for subpoenas and spies." After half a bottle of cab, it made sense. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Jesus." "Marie," she said. "They didn't just overlook this. They never read it. I'm thinking about invoking it." She went quiet. Then, "If you do, this'll hit harder than a federal audit the week bonuses go out." "Good," I said. I opened a blank Word doc. 1 page, no fluff. Just the hammer. "To whom it may concern, at Ironbridge Metals. This letter serves as formal notice of the immediate withdrawal of personal guarantee, as outlined in Clause 9B. Effective upon receipt of this notice, all personal obligations related to the aforementioned agreement are hereby rescinded. Regards, Marie T. Kessler." I printed 2 copies, signed one. dated it carefully, in pen-steady hand, no hesitation. Then I slid it into a folder marked pending, tucked it into the fireproof safe beneath my old W-2s, and sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like it might finally offer me closure. I didn't send it. Not yet. There's a strange kind of power in the pause before impact, like the moment your finger hovers over the breaker, but hasn't flipped it yet. The silence just before the engine combusts. Brendan thought he was driving the truck. He didn't know I still had the parking brake clutched in my fist. The smell hit me before the music cheese cubes, stale cologne, and supermarket roses that looked like they'd been whispering regrets to each other in a walk-in cooler. Third floor cafeteria, 200 p.m. sharp. A folding table draped with vinyl cloth, topped with Costco pastries, and a balloon arch that read, "Happy Trails," like I was being put out to pasture. I walked in wearing a gray blazer, dark sunglasses, and the kind of calm that makes people wonder if you're sedated or just done pretending. I wasn't there for the fruit punch. I came to witness the farce with my own eyes. Some clapped when they saw me. Others stiffened like they'd seen a ghost. Let's be honest. Once you're off payroll, you're just a haunted rumor in a pantsuit. I nodded, said nothing, took a plastic cup of club soda and stood in the corner like I was supervising my own funeral. Then Brendan took the mic. He cleared his throat, flashed his too white smile, and began the eulogy. Marie's time here has been monumental. She's a true legacy, someone we've learned so much from as we head into this exciting next chapter. I tuned out around legacy. My brain replaced his voice with a gentle hum of fluorescent lighting and the grind of my own teeth. As in legacy software, as in outdated, as in disposable, once replicated. 15 minutes in, I slipped out. No wave, no tears. Just the stairwell door clicking shut behind me. Back home, I made a grilled cheese, peeled off the blazer, and watched the sun drop behind the neighbor's broken fence like it owed me rent. I'd nearly forgotten the party when my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in years. Ronnie, WH Manager 0917. Subject heads up. They're rushing a $10 million shipment. Fast-tracked for Tuesday. Looks like they're locking in before Q4. Enjoy retirement, Kess. I didn't reply. I went straight to the safe. Pulled the letter. I sat at the table, the letter in my hand. Read it one more time. Then I called Lauren. Send it. You sure? Yes, I said. Let's see how they handle logistics without the glue. She didn't ask anything else. Just hung up, off to do what she does best, turn paperwork into panic. As for me, I poured a glass of red, walked out onto the back porch, and watched the wind rip through my neighbor's discount gazebo like karma clawing through polyester pride. They wanted a clean exit. Too bad they didn't read the fine print on the fire door. 3 days later, on a sun-bleached stretch of I-75, just past Findlay, Ohio, a fully loaded 16-wheeler carrying $10 million worth of precision alloy screeched to a halt like it hit divine intervention. The driver said the order was flagged during a routine scan. Dispatch told him to hold the line and await further instruction. He waited and waited. Then the message arrived: hold delivery, guarantee withdrawn, do not proceed, no context, no explanation, just 6 words that made the trucker shrug, crack open his thermos, and cue up some Leonard Skynerd while Vanguard's Western supply line bled out in silence. By noon, the Ironbridge Metals client portal was locked. Big red letters across the login page. Shipments suspended. Client contract breach. Guarantee terminated. The Reno plant froze before lunch. By 200 p.m., the Joliet facility followed suit. Every automated workflow tied to that metal hit a digital wall. Screens glitched from green to red like Christmas came early and brought a lawsuit. Phones lit up. Cancellations. Delay warnings. Legal threats from downstream partners who now had a 6-figure pile of nothing rolling toward customers expecting something. One of our old executives, Greg Patterson handshake, like warm tofu, started emailing around 3:23 p.m. The first message was polite. Hi, Marie. Hope retirement's treating you well. We're having a bit of a hiccup with Ironbridge. Any idea what might be happening on your end? Then Marie urgent, please call me back when you can. This is critical. Then Marie, this is a serious breach. Please respond. We need to speak immediately. He tried my cell. I sat in my deck chair, watching the screen light up like a stubborn mosquito. Let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Eventually, it stopped. Lauren handled the response like a surgeon, precise, clinical, detached. Her reply, Per Clause 9b, Ms. Kessler's guarantee is no longer active. Please direct all future correspondence to Vanguard's internal counsel. No salutation, no fluff. Just consequences served cold with perfect formatting. Cold, clean. Lauren's email was one line. Per Clause 9b, Ms. Kessler's guarantee is no longer active. Please direct future correspondence elsewhere. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a legal guillotine dropped mid-sentence. An hour later, my LinkedIn got creepy. First, the COO viewed my profile, then the HR director, then, of course, Brendan. Sweet, oblivious Brendan, probably wondering if he should add crisis containment to his resume. Or maybe experienced in post-guarantee logistics recovery. Translation panic Googling how to undo a catastrophe after firing the one person holding your supply chain together with paperclips and foresight. By sundown, the whispers turned into howls. Someone leaked a Slack thread full of finger-pointing frantic speculation and corporate-grade denial. Someone even tagged the CEO in all caps who signed this guarantee agreement and why wasn't it updated. Meanwhile, I was in the garden watching my tomatoes grow. Slow, quiet, methodical. Funny how loud a company gets when the woman they erased still holds the keys and finally decides to turn one. The courier showed up just after lunch, sweating through a powder blue polo and clutching a manila envelope like it was rigged to explode. Said he needed my signature. The return address simply read, Executive Suite, Confidential. I signed not because I owed them anything, because I was curious what corporate desperation smelled like on 32-pound bond paper, inside a cover letter that opened with, "We value your expertise," which in corporate translation meant, "We lit everything on fire and now need you to hold the hose." Attached a reinstatement offer. Same title, slightly bigger office. A signing bonus big enough to distract anyone who doesn't read footnotes. But I do. And on page 2, buried beneath layers of buzzwords and legal smog, sat the real reason they'd come crawling. All prior agreements shall be rendered null upon execution of the new employment terms. Ah, there it was. This wasn't a promotion. It was a deletion request, an attempt to sweep Clause 9b into a tidy legal oubliette and pretend none of this ever happened. I slid the packet across my kitchen counter, right into a stack of unopened credit card offers and AARP mailers. It didn't even earn its own drawer. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Lauren again. She'd forwarded an internal email subject line flagged red, from someone inside Ironbridge. I didn't even need to open it to know they'd finally figured out what it meant to run a company without the woman who once bet her house to keep it standing. Subject line, leaked Ironbridge internal. It came from a friend inside the supplier company, someone I used to sip whiskey with at logistics conferences back before Vanguard decided client dinners were not strategically aligned. FYI, they're panicking. This just hit internal threads. Quoting here, Vanguard Freight Solutions failed to formally assume the personal guarantee during leadership transition. All contractual liability remains tied to Marie Kessler. Legal team never filed amendment. Entire agreement depended on her continued employment. There it was. Black and white. They never covered their tracks. They'd been barreling across a canyon full speed for years, assuming the bridge was solid. Turns out, I was the bridge, and I had just pulled out the last nail. That night, Vanguard held what they called an emergency stakeholder briefing. A leaked Zoom invite landed in one of my burner inboxes, thanks to a former colleague with a long memory and a petty streak. I didn't log in. Didn't need to. The screenshots hit my inbox before dessert. The CEO looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, tie-crooked eyes hollow. He was flanked by 2 suits who were either lawyers or spin doctors. Probably both. Brendan appeared in a tiny Zoom square off to the side, clinging to a can of Red Bull like it was his MBA thesis. The press statement was a masterpiece of euphemism, unexpected liability exposure. Supplier miscommunication, temporary fulfillment disruption. Then came Brendan's moment. A shareholder asked point blank, "Can you explain the contract lapse?" His response, "I think there may have been, some system glitch with the document chain. Maybe a version control issue." Version control. A federally backed supply contract hanging on a personal guarantee, and this golden retriever in a blazer blamed Dropbox. The chairman audibly sighed. I microwaved some leftover lasagna and queued up a Columbo rerun, because watching an empire implode under its own ego goes best with pasta and petty justice. I didn't respond to the courier, didn't take the calls, didn't even acknowledge the reinstatement offer. I let silence do what it does best, make the guilty echo in their own mess. By Tuesday morning, shareholder emails were leaking faster than their quarterly projections. One thread CC'd to half the board, opened with, "Can someone explain why our entire supply chain hinged on an unrenewed personal guarantee? Preferably before the stock drops again." They scheduled another internal call. That one I didn't need screenshots for. I got the full rundown from an old assistant still loyal who once helped me reroute a full shipment during the printer fire of 2017. Apparently, it started calm and ended in chaos. Lila Chang, VP of Capital Investment, and someone who once watched me carry pallets during a blizzard, while the CEO couldn't find his gloves, spoke up near the end. Her voice reportedly sliced through the posturing like a box cutter through shrink wrap. "I worked with Marie Kessler when she built your logistics infrastructure out of duct tape and 3 a.m. phone calls. If you're telling me the only reason shipments ever moved is because of a clause she buried in a contract to save your hides 10 years ago, I want a full internal audit. Now." Silence, followed by a murmured, "We'll take that under advisement." Later that day, Brendan's name quietly vanished from the internal directory. His email alias Brendan Initiative Vanguard Freight. Comms started bouncing. Interns whispered he'd been put on leave. Translation: escorted out with a box of monogrammed pens and a stunned expression full of legacy entitlement, I'd feel bad if I hadn't watched him smirk through meetings where he explained my own designs back to me like I was a first-year intern. Around 4:30 that afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I checked the transcript. "Marie, this is Arthur Mendez, chairman of the board. I was hoping we could speak privately, clear the air, maybe discuss reconciliation options moving forward." I nearly laughed. Clear the air like this was about who left the coffee pot on in the break room. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened LinkedIn and updated my headline to strategic guarantor. Never just an employee. No rant, no subtweet, no cryptic meme, just clarity. Within an hour, it had 900+ reactions. Recruiters, journalists, ex-colleagues dropping clapping emojis and messages like, "Still a legend." "You built that floor, boss." The silence from Vanguard deafening. They hadn't just underestimated me. They'd erased me. Now they were learning what happens when a company forgets the woman who held the bolts in place. The waves didn't crash. They sighed. I sat on the porch of a beach house I didn't post about, rented under a different name, where the cell service was terrible and the peace was uninterrupted. On the little TV inside, muted but glowing, the news Chiron crawled nervously. Vanguard freight stock tumbles. Contract collapse. Nepotism concerns surface. There was footage of the CEO stepping from a black SUV tie, wilted hands in pockets like they could catch the blame. Voluntary resignation, the voiceover called it. Boardroom speak, for we pushed him before he sank us. No mention of Brendan. I guess his leave was permanent. Lauren forwarded me the last thread. Previous terms are void. Offer is non-negotiable. Attached was her note. They forgot you saved them. You just reminded them how much it cost. I didn't torch the building. I just took my name off the glue. And it all fell apart. If you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or replaced by someone who never earned your seat, then this story is for you. Drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done, or just say, I see you, because sometimes that's all we need. I didn't burn it all down. I just stepped away and let the truth do the heavy lifting. If there's one lesson here, it's this. Your value doesn't vanish when they stop recognizing it. Sometimes walking away is the win. And if you felt that, hit subscribe. Let's keep reminding each other we were never just employees.